When you turn on channels like this one, often you will hear about countless protests and riots like the ones in Venezuela or Occupy Wall Street. These demonstrations showcase that people have the power to change the world. Oftentimes, these demonstrations are criticized and the views of the individuals are the cause of judgment. Other times, the motivation and beliefs of the individuals are enough to justify their actions and sometimes persuade others to join them. In the novel by Julia Alvarez, In the Time of the Butterflies, 4 sisters living under a tyrant in the 1930s and 40s take action against said tyrant. Their bravery and beliefs of equality, as well as the importance of family, shows that effort and motivation can transform a country. We now take you to an interview with Megan Marshall, a literature extraordinaire, who will analyze the book and prove why literature like this is still relevant today.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us today and discussing The Time of the Butterflies.
Thank you so much for having me. This really is a splendid book, and I hope this segment can teach all the kids out there that there's something about timeless novels. First off, this novel has something that will and has been present for as long as the world has been spinning: war. Today in Venezuela, people are protesting because of the lack of basic necessities of life. The government has insisted that the crime's not as bad as people think, and yet the people still protest. The demonstrators are seen as radical and dangerous, and they are so passionate and determined to change the system that they believe their actions are justified. They are not alone in this belief. Countless people across the globe have joined the Venezuelans in the belief that the government must change. Just as the demonstrators believe their riots are necessary, the Mirabal sisters believe the same about taking up arms against their dictator, Trujillo. The oldest, Minerva, becomes involved with the underground resistance and eventually involves the rest of her sisters with her. Minerva has been aware of the horrendous actions of the present dictator, Trujillo, since her adolescence. Most of her life has been spent trying to help the underground overthrow the dictator. She and her sisters view the actions as essential for the liberation of their country and a step towards equality, as well as ending the corruption within the country. Most see the dictator as their savior, and Trujillo certainly makes himself out to be. Despite the notion that all is well, the Mirabal sisters know that something drastic must be done to ensure the safety of the people. They are key players in planning the revolt against Trujillo, just as young demonstrators in Venezuela are key in bringing a safer city for the next generation.
So this book, despite the historical significance but being nearly 54 years old, is it still relevant to young today?
Oh, absolutely. For example, take the conflicts between the Ukraine and Russia. After the Ukrainian Revolution, Russia came in with troops intending to take back the peninsula of Crimea. This act violated the sovereignty of the Ukraine, and most of the world has condemned the actions of Russia.
It would be a mistake if the Russians move forces into other parts of Ukraine.
It would be a clear violation of Russia's commitment to respect the independence and sovereignty and borders of Ukraine and of international laws.
Ukraine says Russian attack helicopters and military transports have taken 2 key airports in Crimea.
How does this relate to the book exactly?
Well, of course, Russia sees their actions as necessary and completely fine. The rest of the world views this as negatively, and the circumstances of the conflict are very poor. In the book, the dictator Trujillo changes the Bible to make himself as holy as Jesus Christ. Trujillo, no matter what twisted view he has on life, truly believes he is the savior of the country. The rest of the people, especially the nuns at Minerva's school, do not approve of Trujillo's altering of history. They do not speak out against it. The rest of the world has told Russia that they are wrong, but nobody has come to the aid of Ukraine. They do not argue with Russia's actions and ideas, but they unwillingly accept them, just as the people of the Dominican Republic accept Trujillo's status as the savior of the country.
One of the biggest present-day riots that comes to mind are the 2011 Egyptian revolutions.
First, let's go to Egypt, where a million-strong rally is expected to take place today in the country's capital. At least 100,000 have already gathered on Cairo's main square in the latest attempt to force President Mubarak to step down. Well, so far, 300 people have reportedly been killed and over 3,000 injured.
Do the views of the protesters in the book relate to the views of the protesters in Egypt?
Yes, I do believe so. In the book, There are small acts of disobedience, especially when Minerva refuses the sexual advances of Trujillo. She wasn't breaking any laws or threatening Trujillo, she was exercising her basic human rights. And that's something most people at the time had forgotten, how to say no. This was very similar to the Egyptian events. Much of the protesting was nonviolent but very public. The only conflict was when the police and military personnel clashed with protesters. Much of the resistance was mainly underground and secret, despite Trujillo knowing much of the country's knowledge. Much of the resistance was mainly underground and secret, despite Trujillo and much of the country knowing of these actions. Minerva knew that she was right when refusing Trujillo, but the other people of the party thought that refusing the dictator was a first-class offense. Another thing to take into consideration is that the upper class and those close to Trujillo will take his side. They plan to reap the benefits of his power and friendship for as long as they can. This is similar to in Egypt, where where everyone except those close in the president's circle were, well, against the president. The rest of the onlookers will side with the oppressed and the innocent. Though almost all of the Mirabal sisters die, their mission is still accomplished. Trujillo was eventually overthrown, actually assassinated for that matter, so they were still successful in the end. It's a shame that all the sisters never got to witness it. The protesters were successful in driving their then president, Hosni Mubarak, out of the country. They held democratic elections and elected a new man into office. The personal views of each individual involved helped fuel the power and the determination of either motion towards a greater good.
Thank you so much for your time today, Miss Marshall.
Anytime. I expect you all to read In the Time of the Butterflies very soon.